what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Foot Candle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Foot Candle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Foot Candle Films here on themesh.tv. This is our ongoing film review and discussion show put on by Foot Candle Film Society and here the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name's Alan Jackson. I am one of the directors of the Foot Candle Film Society and the annual Foot Candle Film Festival. And across the table from me, Chris Fry, the other director in both of those roles as well. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing fine. Hello, podcast listeners.
Yeah. We've got a couple of great films to discuss for reviews today. Some new films, some big films that we'll be discussing. We will be reviewing the films No Time to Die, which features a character named James Bond. Not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's kind of an up-and-coming fictional character in the movie world. And we're going to review his latest entry. Actually, it turns out there's 25 of those films. So go figure.
So we're also going to talk about Halloween, which features Michael Myers. I don't know if people know who that is either.
Right. Michael Myers. Yes.
He's kind of new in the horror world.
He is. He's up and coming there as well. We're talking about some breakthrough characters that are just trying to get some attention in the world right now.
Right.
Michael Myers from Halloween Kills. We will be reviewing that film as well here momentarily. So after those two reviews, we'll have some movie news to share with you. And then we'll end the show with our recommendations of films we think you ought to check out that we recently caught up with or were reminded of. But Chris, we've got a lot to cover. So how about let's go right into our first film review, which is the latest James Bond film. And it is No Time to Die.
Bond, any thug can kill. I have to know I can trust you.
Well, I understand double O's have a very short life expectancy.
You are a kite dancing in a hurricane, Mr. Bond.
Is this really what you want? Always alone?
So, Chris, I consider myself a little bit of a James Bond aficionado.
Okay.
So I have watched the James Bond movies since I think I can remember watching movies at whatever
Have you
age.
seen all of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have seen all 25 films in one way, shape, or form.
Got you.
Definitely the Roger Moore years were kind of my more formative years when I was growing up. I remember that more, but then I did spend time going back and seeing all the Sean Connery films and really enjoying those. I find some level of enjoyment from all the James Bond iterations that we've had. I really liked actually what they did with Pierce Brosnan for the most part for a couple of films. And now with Daniel Craig, obviously these last 5 films, which that's what he's actually done so far and will have done because he is officially leaving the franchise, he has said. With these 5, they definitely tried to go for a little more of a grounded, more grittier James Bond than they've gone in the past. But here we are at the 5th film, No Time to Die. They bring in a new director, Cary Fukunaga, and he helped bring about the story of James Bond, who has left active service. We find him at the beginning of the film, no longer a 007. But then he gets hired by the CIA, of all people, to help on a mission which kind of spirals into a much larger story that brings him back into connection with MI6, as well as some old haunts, some old characters kind of coming back to him to some degree, and Rami Malek as the villain. So,
Saffron.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, with this, I know I'm a bigger fan of James Bond movies than you are.
Yes.
And I going into that, I did go into each of these films with a little more anticipation and just, I know what I'm getting into with James Bond films. I know what I'm looking for. I know the formula that's going to be hit. And my question is always just how much are they going to tweak the formula, or how well are they going to play into it? So let me ask you this, Chris, not being the James Bond fan that I am, but you probably having some level of intrigue. I think I have to guess, have you enjoyed at least a couple of the Daniel Craig films, more than maybe the average James Bond film?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
Okay. So like Skyfall, probably. I think you probably enjoyed Skyfall.
Yeah, of the Daniel Craig era, I would say that's definitely my favorite. So I guess that tips my hand a little bit because No Time to Die was his last one. But Skyfall is definitely the peak of James Bond for me, especially during here. Actually, I guess I'd probably say it's not that I'm a bigger fan of all the other ones because I could take or leave them, but yeah. So Skyfall is kind of the high water mark for me.
See, in Casino Royale, which was Daniel Craig's first one, is actually, I don't know if I can say it's my favorite James Bond film because I think I can go back and more of the classics kind of always have a warmer spot in my heart. But as far as more recent films, Casino Royale I think is the best James Bond has been in quite a while.
Okay.
I like Skyfall as well. I thought that was really good. So here we are, No Time to Die. Chris, let me ask you, this being Daniel Craig's last outing as this version of James Bond, how did you think the film did in kind of setting up his legacy and how he's going to be remembered as this character in the years to come?
So, it is kind of a sprawl. It's hard to talk about just this film without kind of referencing the other films in the Daniel Craig era, the other four films.
And I should note, I think this is the first time that a James Bond series of films have kind of been woven together with a more overlapping story, where all the other James Bond versions, I mean, maybe there's a few little carryover points from one movie to another, but there's never been a large story that kind of covers multiple films.
That's kind of interesting. That's kind of was my confusion. I started watching No Time to Die in the theater, and I was like, wait a second. I had seen Spectre, but I didn't, I just knew like, oh yeah, it was a movie. I remembered who the bad guy was. I remembered that Léa Seydoux was in it. But other than that, and I didn't think I needed to do homework to see No Time to Die. And then when it started off, I was like, wait a second. There was like jumping in timelines and stuff. I'm like, okay, clearly I should have watched Spectre again before I sat down to watch No Time to Die. Now, that said, I was, did get up to speed and was okay with where I was, but I was never expecting the No Time to Die to kind of be its own, or the James Bond films to be their own like BCU, the Bond Cinematic Universe, as opposed to like the Marvels. Because, it's like, Marvel movies, it's like, okay, I need to know where this film ended up because this is going to be referencing things. So that kind of took me by surprise. But that said, I guess kind of refreshing that they're trying to do more than just make like these one-off movies where a guy looks good, walks around, shoots people, and then at the end the world's saved and then you go on. Like you're saying, these films were aspiring to be a little bit more. So I did like that. That said, did this reach the high water mark of Skyfall? No. For me, that was like the perfect one. And I think the thing for me was this whole time, this film, I felt like was wearing on its sleeve, hey guys, this is it. We're ending it. It was like it was self-aware that it was going to be the last film
for Daniel
Craig and so it's kind of like, I don't know, there's like this slow build of like monumental tensions. And then I will say, I have watched various other incarnations of Bond. The way they gave a send-off to Daniel Craig in the final moments of this film was not what I would have expected in my wildest dreams. So I do applaud them for that. Now, that said, which we can, get into other parts about the film and what you thought about it. You referenced in your opening that he had no longer had the 007 title. I didn't follow because I'm not the big Bond fan that you were. I was not aware that it had been teased on the internet that Lashana Lynch, I wasn't even aware of who she is. I think I've maybe heard her name before, but that she was going to be in this film. Not only that, but apparently a lot of buzz on the internet, she was going to be 007. So I thought that was interesting. That was new to me. But then I was kind of disappointed that they kind of let that lapse a little bit. I was like, oh man, now where could they go from here? I don't know. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Alan. What's your reaction?
I like this film.
Okay.
I had a good time with it. Do have a lot of misgivings, a lot of issues, a lot of concerns, but overall, as I look at, especially, I mean, I didn't think Spectre was that entertaining or that memorable. Quantum of Solace was his second one. I definitely didn't like that one.
Okay.
So his whole run has been peaks and valleys, and this is on the higher side. I think this ended up higher. Not as good as Casino Royale, not really as good as Skyfall, but I felt like
it's
it
kind
had
of
a
a
lot.
third.
Yeah, but it had, it was the middle of the ground.
Okay.
There was a lot of moments I liked. There were some moments I didn't like, but overall, I think I still came away feeling like this was a pretty good Bond entry. You're right. It did play up the send-off mentality of the whole film, maybe a little too much.
Okay.
But at the same time, I like the fact that I actually felt like there were stakes in this Bond film, which I don't
that's
normally
true.
feel. You normally feel in a Bond film, okay, it's James Bond. He, everything's great.
Everything's
Bond's
great.
going to win in the end.
Everything's
and
gonna
he's
work out.
And it's
Right.
just going to lead right into the next movie. And this one had a little bit more going for it, where they said, no, we want this to be some closure. We want there to be some stakes in the film. And there were. And I liked that. That was like the first time I can remember James Bond actually having some gravitas with what the plot was trying to do and where the film was going to end up. That being said, the film, of all the Daniel Craig films, this one has leaned in more to the goofy side of James Bond.
Of the Daniel Craig
Daniel Craig
yes,
movies.
Okay. Like
Because
some
they were
jokes and stuff, or
the first few films are so much about grounded, more reality, more gritty, and just, Bond had some quips here and there, but it was never like rapid fire humor.
got you.
This film, I was surprised, leaned in a lot more with the one-liners and with the off-the-wall, over-the-top sets and big villain doomsday devices. I mean, it was more than I've seen in the last four films.
Right.
I kind of liked it because it was kind of a little more throwback. I mean, even I'll say this, even the closing credits, not spoiling anything, but the closing credits actually plays an old James Bond theme song. It's actually the one Louis Armstrong did on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Wow.
Which obviously they were doing that to say, look, we are kind of acknowledging the whole James Bond legend. And this film, I felt like, tried to throw in all the different elements to say everything you liked about James Bond, whether you got the grittiness, if you like the more recent films, but
Right.
if you like the over-the-top crazy plots and big, we're going to kill everybody in the world, the villains like trying to destroy everybody, we got that for you too. Oh, and look at this big set where the villain lives and his big base. Oh, isn't it crazy? I think they're really trying to play all angles. It works fine. It doesn't work consistently.
Okay.
There are ups and downs with the film, but overall, I had a good time with it. I thought it was
You
well
thought it was
done
a
film.
satisfying end to the
Fairly
Daniel Craig
satisfying
era.
film.
Okay.
Yeah, fairly satisfying. I still, just like with most Bond films, I still don't really understand the plot of what the villain's trying to do and how. And even the ending doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
Even my son and I were trying to rationalize the ending on the way home. It's never crystal clear, but I don't think that's why you go in to watch a James Bond movie, is to perfectly figure out the villain's machinations of how he's going to destroy the world. You just kind of go with it. So, I had an okay time with the film. I wish it was a little better, but it was okay. It was fine. I think if you're a James Bond fan, I think you'll find enough to enjoy out of it. But I don't think going in expecting it to be what I think are Casino Royale, Skyfall, some of those high water marks in recent years, it's not going to hit those for you. So,
Sure. I thought it was an interesting send off, and they had been trying to kind of retool Bond, like you say, make him more gritty. And this was kind of leaning back to kind of the old school
little
Bond.
campier
And actually
at
the
times,
old like style Bond with the little campy stuff, that was the stuff I never really cared for.
Yeah.
So that's why I never really, and honestly, the fact that every Bond film did seem to be kind of like a TV movie where it's like, yeah, you don't have to see him in order. It doesn't matter. It's just like, it's kind of like the movie of the week. You just, okay, he fights this criminal, it's over. It doesn't matter. And that's what I found refreshing about these 5 films is that you did, and I didn't realize how much, obviously, like I said, because I had forgotten Spectre, because I, like you, wasn't that big on it. But then I realized, well, I needed to remember it because I need to know what's going on. So I like that better.
But I think to be fair to anybody who hasn't seen the film, the only thing you need to understand is that James Bond is in love with a woman that is from a previous film.
That's true.
And that if you remember from Casino Royale, there was a woman that he met, Vesper, that he was also kind of more of a first love for him in this series, and she died. I mean, that happened 5 movies ago.
Right.
That's really all you need to know with it. I mean, everything else, I think they do an okay job of saying, all right, like, you don't need to get too deep into it. Yes, there's the Blofeld, the villain played by Christoph Waltz. If you know a little background on him, it's helpful, but I don't think it keeps you from enjoying the film if you don't know his background in the film. He plays a part, but it's a part that I think is fairly standalone and doesn't,
Well, and I think that was my problem with, you've kind of alluded to Rami Malek and his role as Safin. So Blofeld, to me, was the most interesting part of Spectre, and I don't feel like he was in it enough. And then with this film, the fact that he's in it some, and the parts that he does play are really like kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then that kind of sets poor Rami Malek up to fail, because I don't feel like he was given enough, and he was so. I feel like honestly, it was all like in the character writing. He was kind of made out to be very cartoonish, and that's what he ended up being.
I did not like the villain.
Okay.
I did not like Rami Malek in that role. I did not like the villain as a whole.
Wow.
I just did a Dr. Seuss
Dr.
Seuss. I felt like he was miscast. I'm not saying Rami Malek's a bad actor. I like him. I think I just don't think he had the gravitas that was needed for this role.
Gotcha.
This is the last villain of this Daniel Craig James Bond, and he's supposed to be the one that's kind of been a little more mastermindish, throughout the series in a way. And yet they play him as a what's very typical as these big bad guys now is you get somebody who's very unassuming. You get somebody with a kind of a real softer voice and more menacing, but not being overly menacing, just more like subtle. And yeah, Rami Malek played that part, but it was just a boring villain. And I'd much rather would have seen Blofeld play a much bigger role in the film than this one.
I'm on the same page with that.
And plus, trying to do the math on the ages.
That so bothered me.
Yeah. The age doesn't work.
They show him in the beginning as kind of a flashback.
And it's supposed to have been like 15 plus years ago.
He's got a mask on.
Yeah, but still. It was supposed to be like 15 to 18 years ago. And I don't buy it. So that threw me out of the film quite a bit. Yeah. And so overall, I just don't feel like the villain worked.
Okay, fair enough.
That was one issue for me with it. But otherwise, I like the other characters that we had. I mean, Elia Cedillo, I thought was still really good as Madeline. We have Ana de Armas, who is only in the film a little bit, which I think a lot of people are kind of surprised by. She's kind of was touted as being like a big player in the film, and she's in like a 15-minute sequence.
Right.
But she was fun. I liked her character in the film, so I thought that was good. Ray Fiennes as M, I thought also very good. You mentioned LaShonda Lynch, who you may recognize from Captain Marvel. So she was
that's where
Brie Larson's friend, kind of in the film.
Got you.
Yeah. LaShonda Lynch as Nomi, the new 007. Yes, I think. Also, all of them really good. So I like the supporting cast. I like all the players. Rami Malek, I just thought was miscast, and I wish the villain had a little more unique style to him than trying to mimic what we've seen in so many other villains in recent years.
Yeah, I'll echo that. The supporting cast I really like, and I feel like if this was, which they're not, they've already talked about searching for the next Bond or whatever. But if this was the last Bond film, I felt like they gave Daniel Craig a good send off, and they also did a good job with Ray Fiennes as M, Ben Whishaw as Q, Naomi Harris as Moneypenny, Jeffrey Wright as Felix. Kind of like an acquaintance of Bond's who he keeps running into. And I felt like the way they use those, I guess sometimes you feel like, oh, well, they got to have Moneypenny in this because it's like, it's a Bond film. We have to at least see her, reference her. But I didn't feel like they were like shoved or forced in. They were woven in so that it worked.
They
And
all
each
had
character
nice,
like,
and they all had their
part.
nice moments. They all had their key scenes. I think it was a good, what do you call it? Where it's a whole cast, good
Ensemble. Yeah,
there you go. That's
sure.
the word I was looking for. So that's No Time to Die. I had a pretty good time with it. Can I ask you one quick question to see if you point out something? This is very minor and should not affect anybody's enjoyment of the film in any way, shape, or form, but I'm
Okay.
just more curious. So the composer of the film, the music was Hans Zimmer.
Okay. Yes.
There is a moment in the film, actually several minutes in the film, where a score is used
Oh, interesting.
from a different movie.
Really?
I mean, so noticeable that both me and my son, and granted, he pays more attention to scores because that's kind of what
Yeah,
he wants
sure,
to do.
sure.
But we both look at each other when the score plays and like, what are they doing? Hans Zimmer actually pulled a score from another one of his films. And it's from the Dark Knight films.
I was going to guess just because,
No, there was a 5-minute sequence probably in the film down where they're towards the end, they're trying to deal with all the whatever these glowing things out in the water, sticks in the water, and they're trying to figure out all that. There's like very, very obviously noticeable. The theme from The Dark Knight is being used in that sequence. Nowhere else in the film. The rest of the film is very Bond-like with a lot of horns and brass and all. This was all strings, and it was exactly the Dark Knight theme.
I think by that time I was kind of exhausted because 163-minute runtime.
It is a long movie.
I was like, okay.
You're not
I feel
really
like-
paying attention to the music as
No,
much. so.
no, but
We were.
that does not surprise. And when you said like if I could have guessed, because I was aware that Hans Zimmer did do the score, like what he might he have like stolen from, I'd be like, well, probably The Dark Knight.
Oh yeah,
So, sure enough.
I almost what I envision in my head is somebody in the studio execs saw the draft of the film and said, hey, the score in this part of the movie, I don't really care for as much. We need to swap it out with something different. And they're like, well, we don't really have anything else. And Hans was like, hey, I've got this theme from this other movie that might work really good here.
Wow.
Drop it in and like, oh yeah, that's perfect. We love it. And it's being used. Anyway, I
Wow.
think it's very obvious, but I thought that was interesting.
That definitely is.
So that is No Time to Die. I mean, I think we're both giving it a relatively positive review.
Yeah, I think it's a good cap to Craig's run as it, and I think there's one surprise that they try to make a surprise that I don't think anybody watching the film is going to be surprised by, and it has to do with some interactions that he has with Leah Seydoux' character as Madeline, and something about their relationship together, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. So there's something that the film tries to make a surprise about, and it's like, okay, and then they like really try to make, and you're like, yeah, right, we already got that. So there's that.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then there's the one that comes at the end of the film, which I found that genuinely surprising. So that may elevate it more than just being like, oh, okay, because I kind of appreciate what they did. So yeah, I think it was okay. Definitely, I'm not going to say it's a Skyfall or a Casino Royale, but it's probably a good third place finish.
Third place.
So,
Third place finish for Daniel Craig.
It gets a medal.
with No Time to Die. All right. Well, that is No Time to Die. It is still playing in theaters as we speak, as we record this. And we are saying, especially if you're a James Bond fan, it's a worthwhile entry into the 25 film legacy. If you're not a James Bond fan and you haven't seen any of the other Daniel Craig movies, I do think it might be a lot to absorb.
Sure. And I think if you were wanting to see like, oh, should I bother? Maybe start with this first with Casino Royale.
Yeah.
And if you like it, well then,
You can build up to the fifth one.
Yeah.
So. All right. Good deal. Well, let's move on to our second review, which is another sequel of sorts and continuing a long-term legacy character. It is, gosh, I don't even know what film in the franchise this number is, but at least in this little set of films that we're going to be talking about, it's the second. And it is the sequel to the 2018 version of Halloween, also directed by David Gordon Green. It is Halloween Kills.
Let it
So oftentimes before I get a chance to go to the theater, I do see little bits of reviews on Facebook or Twitter, or sometimes I, see them just online, and people will make just general statements, and I'll just kind of briefly look at it and then, not read any more because I don't want to spoil the movie. So one of these instances just so happened to come through. I saw a headline from Paste Magazine, and they said, "Cynical sequel Halloween Kills, gorily treads water." And then a little bit of, did read like the sub headline and then quit because I didn't want to spoil the movie. But it said the body count is through the roof in this illogical continuation of the Michael Myers saga, which fails to deliver the payoff it promises. So hearing that general thesis, and then the article would proceed from there, which I have not read in fairness, but just based on that kind of their feelings on the film. Alan, how did your experience pair with theirs on seeing this sequel to the 2018 Halloween?
About the same.
Okay.
The key word treading water, I think, was the key in that review you just mentioned.
Okay.
This is the second film of this already reported trilogy. And it's very obvious. It's the second film that really doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing other than continuing the story for the third film.
Sure.
Yes, it is the prototypical Michael Myers is on the loose and he's going to go around killing people. And oh my gosh, we're all freaked out because Michael Myers is on the loose. I admire the film for wanting to explore one aspect. Unfortunately, it just did, I think, a horrible job of it.
I think I know where you're going with that.
This whole impact on the community around this town. And we've never really seen the community of this town, as much horror as they've had to go through, kind of come together and trying to decide how they're going to deal with this menace. And I liked where that was starting to go in the film. You actually have what you've come to find out are characters from the original 1978 Halloween who were children back then. You now have them here. And you get a little bit of a sense of, they have several scenes early in the film where the community is kind of recalling that night from the original Halloween movie. But then they're also now trying to come together and work together as a group to figure out how they're going to handle this situation with him coming back.
Right.
But boy, does that subplot just go off the rails and just really kind of come off really goofy and dumb by the end of it all. So I admire what they were trying to do. Trying to do something a little different than just slasher running around killing everybody. But man, after a while, those scenes of the angry mob trying to deal with Michael Myers got to be laughable, and they introduced a whole subplot of them following a character that turned out to be the wrong character, and it was just dumb. It just made no sense at the end of the film, and it was just a waste of time. I felt like.
Which was, I guess you're saying that's what, when all this is doing is building towards the third movie.
I mean, again,
just a waste of
at
time.
the end of this movie, we're no further along with any kind of development of characters or story, with one exception from where we were from the first film. And so there again, it's just an exercise in, let's just have as many creative kills as we can and all that. And I didn't find any of the scenes to be terribly scary or really well done even from the prototypical slasher film standpoint. I felt like it was all very rudimentary, very run of the mill. And then the Jamie Lee Curtis character, of course, Laurie Strode,
Sure.
Kind of the main lead in these films. She's in a hospital bed for most of the film, and all she does is give very tired rally speeches to her family or the cop in the bed next to her. There's no there's no strategizing. There's no thinking about really what's happening. It's just, we have to kill him. Evil dies tonight. We have to do this. It was just, okay, get it. Point taken. We all know that something has to happen with this guy. But what are we going to do? We don't really know, other than we're all going to get pitchforks and run up and down the hospital hallways looking for him. I did not care for it. There's an ending to this film that I at least thought was a little more creative and interesting the last closing minutes I can talk about a little bit later without spoiling, I think. But
Okay.
I thought it had some creativity to it and was at least kind of interesting. But yeah, it didn't work for me, Chris. Didn't work for me. So I want to hear your thoughts.
So I'll start off with some positives.
Okay, sure.
Overall, I felt like it was, I liked the 2018 Halloween.
Okay.
And, you know, since we kind of detailed our history with the original Bond franchise, I'll say Halloween franchise, I'd seen the original Halloween film by John Carpenter, and I liked it. I never saw the sequels.
Yeah, I never did.
So 2018's Halloween was the first Halloween that I'd kind of returned to and seen it. And I liked that. I felt like it was kind of, they were using the original text, but they were kind of innovating a little bit. So I liked that. I liked the fact that it was kind of Laurie Strode as superhero in a way and like becoming this equal menace to Michael Myers.
I did not like the 2018 quite as much as you, but I still respected it, and I think still had a relatively good time with it. Yeah.
So I'll focus on positives first. Something that I was not expecting that I really liked was the film. I knew that this film was going to start right when the last one left off. So, but I wasn't expecting it to start with a flashback. And I was like, well, okay, they're just giving it, they're wasting some time and they're just showing us the original thing just because, they just need to do something to kind of build up tension or whatever. But I was a Thunder Road Halloween crossover that I wasn't expecting. And for those of you that aren't aware what Thunder Road is, it was a movie that Jim Cummings starred in. So he is in this film in the flashback, and I really liked his role. I really liked what he did with he played a police officer, which is what he does in Thunder Road, which is not a horror film. But so that to me was fun, and it was an interesting way to kind of have a winking flashback in a way. So I liked that. So that was unexpected, and I like that. You were talking about how they tried to handle like a topic and you were like, well, that was interesting that they tried to do that. And to me, what I'll say that I was surprised they did it, but it didn't in the end really work, was the kind of about mob justice.
Yeah.
And you're saying how they were reflecting on maybe this town coming together to try to rid themselves of Michael Myers, but the dangers in sometimes succumbing to mob justice. I thought that was interesting.
Yes.
And actually in the hospital, them running around doing it, that didn't bother me. But what didn't work is I felt like towards the end of the film, they returned to some, you got to say mob justice because it's more than just one or two people. And they kind of then do mob justice again. And it's like, and you feel like at that point, you're supposed to be cheering them on. And it's like, wait a second, you just said how this was bad. And now you're expecting us to cheer these. So it was kind of like the whole you can't have it both ways argument. So that kind of derailed it, kind of unfortunately, at the end of the film, which is when you're supposed to completely be on the film's side. And we'll segue into a little bit of, not spoiler territory, but hinting kind of things at the end of the film. There's a character that meets their demise, and the way that they meet their demise, I was A, not expecting, but B, I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
and
I
then
agree.
they hint something about, it's no spoiler, obviously, as Alan indicated, this is the second film of a trilogy that David Gordon Green had signed on to. We're going to get Halloween Ends in 2022. So, Michael Myers is still going to be around, people. So they kind of hint for the first time, well, granted, I hadn't seen all the other Halloween movies, but in the first time in this thing, like something about Michael Myers. And I was like, that is interesting that they're referencing something about his character, his being.
I will say the last 5 minutes of this film were surprising to me. And I thought at least had something interesting artistically going on.
Okay.
Because, well, as kind of ludicrous as the lead up to that ending scene is, it still kind of worked to where, it's the middle chapter. It's the darkest chapter in a trilogy, just like you typically have in the middle one. Like, things are at rock bottom by the end of the second one. And that absolutely is the case here.
Sure.
And so anyway, I did think there was some interesting moments to it. But, Chris, the thing is, and I did like the idea too, that it was this takes place immediately after the end of the previous film.
Right.
This is the same night. like,
Right.
all one night. And I would hope they continue that for the third film,
I
where
would-
it's basically going into the morning of, whatever.
I
It's
think
like-
they'd have to do
it's
that,
like all in
right?
a 12-hour period or something.
Right.
The problem is, though, I mean, it has been 2 years since that first film came out. There are some moments in this film where they are trying to have you recall back to that first film that just didn't work. And I just have to bring this out because it's funny for us personally.
Okay.
There was a guy who was an actor in the first Halloween 2018 one that we've met, Drew Schneid, who
Oh, yeah.
from the
Drought.
film Drought.
Yeah.
And they played at our film festival, and he did a great performance in that film. He was in the 2018 Halloween.
Yes.
Well, he's in this one
Yes, he is.
for like 5 seconds.
Yeah. 2 different 5 seconds, so a total of maybe 10.
True, and it's just there again, and we're supposed to have a moment where his mother sees him, and it's all emotional. But like, yeah, but I had to like even recall from him, like, remind me, who was this again, and why are we supposed to care about this? And it's like,
Sure.
oh yeah, and 2 years ago he,
I guess
he died in the 2018
Right.
film, so here he is again.
I guess originally maybe this film was supposed to come out last year.
Possibly,
so maybe
if
that
it
would
had been
help.
1 year later, I could see that it would have a little more impact. But it
Sure.
has been a little more time, and to kind of recall back to all the characters that died in the first one, it was like, okay, it didn't quite work as well. It didn't have the impact that you would hope.
I forgot. I totally forgot at the beginning of the film. I remembered that character just because I remembered he was in this movie, the one you're referencing, Drew Scheid. But what I didn't remember is one of the Strode women. There's Judy Greer, who plays Karen. Of course, there's Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays Laurie Strode. Then we have Andy Matichak, who plays Allison. I did remember there were 3 women. It was like, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. Yeah, I got that. What I didn't remember was that Andy had a boyfriend. So
Right,
and
yes.
even more mind blowing to me, in the beginning of the film, I didn't recognize this because I'd forgotten. Like you say, it's kind of like, it's kind of a callback to our Bond discussion. I needed to do my homework of watching Spectre before I watched that. Yeah. I needed to maybe, I guess, revisit Halloween 2018 before I saw this, because her boyfriend, Cameron, is dressed up in a Halloween costume.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember that. And
Yes.
so at the beginning, I'm like, wait, who's this guy? And why is he doing like, I was kind of.
No, it was
disorienting.
I don't mind the serialization of the story.
No.
But, I think the filmmakers need to understand a little more time has passed. And it's not like these characters from the first film were like super memorable,
Right.
like really standout characters. These are a
Right.
lot of like smaller, minor characters, but yet they're trying to get us to recall and feel some sort of emotion because they're there or gone or whatever. And it just doesn't work.
It's kind of, granted, I do understand we're supposed to recall something. We know it's following the night up, but the people we remember are the Strode women.
Yeah.
Those are the ones it's like, okay, if you want us to remember people, those are the ones we're going to remember.
Yeah, right.
Well, and of course, Michael Myers. But, outside of that.
Yeah. I also did not like. So, okay, I mean, every time you have a movie like this, a slasher horror film, you have to take with a grain of salt that the characters in the film are going to act very irrationally and make dumb moves.
Sure.
And unfortunately, you have to, because, otherwise, if everybody did what they should do in those situations and get the heck out of their house and run
Right.
and go somewhere safe, then the movie there would be no movie. Okay. So I get that you have to have your characters be a little dumb. But the whole sequence with, I'll just say Big John and Little John, I thought was just, not only was it just over the top, really kind of blatantly stereotypical and just really kind of, I think, very broad in how they try to depict this couple, but also and a little insulting at times, but also the fact that here it is, 2 people who are living in the house they know Michael Myers came from.
Right.
And they know that Michael Myers is on the loose, and they hear somebody in their house, and yet they still insist on going upstairs to face this. And
Right.
it just makes, I at that point, I'm like, okay, yeah,
This is ridiculous.
This is ridiculous.
I can
this
see
is
that.
really, really dumb. So,
Right.
So that's disappointing that they kind of went those path again. You've got opportunity to do something a little smarter with these films, and I thought they were going there with the mob justice side of things, and it just fell apart, and it just didn't work in the end. So,
Well, I admire them for at least trying, because like you say, there are with horror slasher films where you have if it's in a series and it's built on something like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, where you have a returning big bad guy, a returning big bad slasher guy, then you kind of know certain things are just going to have to happen in a certain way. But the fact that they attempted to have the whole mob justice angle, I thought was interesting. I liked the clever flashback using Jim Cummings. But overall, it was just a bridge film. And like you had mentioned, the most important character, Laurie, is sidelined for the entire movie.
Absolutely.
It'd be like having the Star Wars movie where Luke Skywalker is just like not around for the whole time. And it's like, well, okay, so then, or just, a Bond film where Bond is in a hospital bed the entire time, to throw back to our first review. And that was the problem for me, is you kept expecting her to like come back. And I'm sure the third movie, I think, will give us more of what we maybe would have wanted.
To. I mean,
right? You would
well,
assume.
it's just, there again. And again, I don't mind the idea of her being sidelined for the film, because it does give a chance for other characters to develop.
Step up, sure.
But, if you're going to come back to her, just make it be more interesting and more what we would expect Laurie Strode to be doing.
Right.
And again, she's basically just giving out rah-rah speeches, from her or from her bedside. Right. And yes, she tries to get up one time, and she's got a lot of injuries, and she's wanting to leave, and they force her back into the bed, and it just, you could have done a lot more with her even in that bedridden state and made it more interesting. But instead, I feel like they only had Jamie Lee Curtis for like 2 days of filming for this film. All right, well, let's use her. She's going to be in the hospital bed. We're saving up to pay her for when we need her for the third film. So and I hate being cynical about it, but that's kind of the way it came across, is like, we only have her for a limited amount of time. We can only do so much with her. Let's just kind of let her lie low until the third film comes around. Yeah. And it just wasn't as interesting. So, well, I was disappointed by Halloween Kills. I mean, I am curious to see what they do with the third one. Sure. And the fact that the third one is coming out in 1 year instead of 2 to 3 years later, I think will help to some degree. But can they close this thing out and make it interesting and make it a worthwhile entry in this whole saga? I don't know. I really don't know. David Gordon Green is a director, we've followed for quite a while, and I think he's very much hit or misses for me. I think there's some movies he's done, especially ones on the more smaller independent side, that I'm big fans of. His entries into broader comedy were also very hit or miss. Horror has been, I don't know yet. I mean, we brought up a story recently about him doing the Exorcist film, and he's actually a producer on a remake of Hellraiser. So he's kind of bought into this whole revisiting horror franchises. It was just disappointing that this movie didn't do more with what they could have done, or do it smarter or better than what they tried to pull off. And one thing I will say is a positive. I didn't really mention any positives, but the look of the film was really, it had a much more of a 70s vibe to the look and the graininess of the film and the texture of the film, which I liked. It definitely felt rougher and like, more independent than a big budget studio film. And I did like that. So I just wish the story and the writing was stronger for this entry. So.
Sure.
All right. Well, that is Halloween Kills. It is available both in movie theaters and also on Peacock, which is where I saw it, strangely enough. So.
Well, and I'll say this. Okay, so this is good. You had the Peacock at home experience, and I went to see it in the theater. And I will say, I think if I had watched it Home Alone style, I think I would have liked it less. I was in a theater since coming back from the pandemic. Usually there may be 15, 20 other people. This theater, it was a Saturday night. It was packed.
Wow. Okay. Well, that probably
so it was a little nerve wracking
for a horror film like this. Yeah.
And it was like you had the people like nervous laughter, or you had the jump scare, and you were there with an audience. So I will say that probably helped it give it a bump.
No, I agree. I think you're right. I think watching it at home like I did, I didn't get quite the same theatrical experience from it, and I think that probably would help your enjoyment a little bit. At home watching it, it was a lot easier to pick out things that didn't work as well. So, all right. Well, you do have your options in person in theaters or on Peacock. At home, you have to have a Peacock subscription, which I think minimum's like $5 a month for that. So, could be a different option for watching it.
So right before we go to a break, I want to tell people, like, you can avoid both spoilers for James Bond and Halloween by just skipping ahead a little bit, and if you hear the break or you hear sorry, then you'll know you've missed the spoilers. I'd like to first do just a teeny bit of spoiler talk for James Bond, and then do a little bit of spoiler talk about how we felt about the things we did.
All right, so this is your warning. Spoiler talk about both films coming up right now. So skip ahead if you do not want to be spoiled on anything for that. Okay, Chris, what would you like?
So quickly, James Bond. How did you feel about them literally killing James Bond? I mean, he didn't. Somebody didn't kill him. He sacrificed himself.
He sacrificed himself. It was an obvious.
Was that a surprise to you?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Right.
I can't think. There's not been a James Bond film, even at the end of an actor's run, where they've killed him.
Right. I didn't think so, but I'm not an aficionado. So this was the first time they'd ever said, "Okay, this is his story arc ending, and he's literally going to die."
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It was surprising. Okay. I still kind of was a little stunned at the end that they actually went through with it.
Yeah, me too.
Although what I read up on this, just a little background knowledge.
Oh, are they going to say that he somehow survived?
No.
Okay.
I think the fact that every other actor who's played James Bond, they never knew doing their last film that they were doing their last film as that character. So
because Craig had kind of said,
Daniel Craig, they knew.
He was saying, I don't want to come back. This is it. Okay.
So I think Roger Moore did not know that his last film was going to be his last film when he was making it. He made that decision after it came out.
Right.
Same with Sean Connery. So they really couldn't do a send-off on any of those actors even if they had wanted to. But with this one, they did. And they did a heck of a send-off. I mean, yeah, they killed him. He's dead. And was shocking.
Yeah.
I thought fairly well done. I mean, I liked it. I liked the way they ended it.
I did too. The stuff that I also referenced I mean, the fact that they kind of teased oh, here's this young girl. She's not your daughter. Then you're like, yes, she is. And then at the end, they're like, oh, she is your daughter. Like, yeah, we kind of knew that. So,
I mean, I know they were trying to play coy midway through the film when they introduced the young girl and trying to play funny, like James Bond thinks it's his daughter, and the woman's like,
no, don't worry, it's not yours.
It's not yours.
It's like,
but then you see them bonding. You see him caring for her so much,
making breakfast.
Okay,
come on,
we know where this is going to go. And when I started to get the hints that they actually were going to kill him, I'm like, well, yeah, now he's got to find out that that's really his daughter, or at least get confirmation of that.
Sure.
And they did. And
it
kind of played out the way you would expect at that point. So
right,
it was a surprising end for sure. Kind of a shocking.
And that's what disappoints me a little bit. I really liked the whole him being stripped of 007, and so then when Numi kind of gives the title back to him, like, no, A, I want you to keep 007, and B, I don't think we need to search for James Bond. Let's have you be the new James Bond because, well, you're not because you're a lady, but you'll be the new 007. I thought that would have been so ingenious. I was okay with
her giving the number back because, again, he was going to be dead within an hour on the film. So, it was not like, she's like retiring that number back to him.
So she could still be 007 in the next one. Yeah.
Although, if you stay till the end of the credits, there's not a scene. There's not a scene, but
because I didn't.
The very typical text comes up at the end of a James Bond movie.
James Bond will be back.
It says James Bond will return, which means they're going to have another actor playing James Bond. Which could this have been an opportunity to say, you know what? Let's just go with Noni. She is now 007. And
well, maybe there'll be a new James Bond, but he won't be 007. But no,
you still want her to be the main. I kind of wouldn't mind seeing her as the main character.
I'm on the same page. I want her to be the main.
And then with Halloween.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead to Halloween because that was kind of what I wanted. So I was surprised that Judy Greer died.
Yes. That was shocking to me.
But they had introduced this new thing how, well, the reason Michael is just like going around and can't be stopped is because maybe there's something to him like supernatural, or there's some type of force that maybe just he can't be killed.
They've always teased at that, and like in any of the, I think, even in the first film, there was some teasing of that about whether or not that's the case. I felt like the mob basically
he's just pure evil,
looking like they killed him.
Oh yeah.
And then him just rising back up and murdering all of them. And then you find him up in the window with Judy Greer's character, which is Laurie Strode's daughter.
Right.
And he massacres her.
Right.
It was shocking. But again, it did end us on that. Okay, yeah, it's all now set up for the third one of how it's going to end out. But it was surprising.
Well, and
that's why I like the kind of they were cutting between her and what he did to the mob and kind of this. It was a lot more dreamy like in a way, the way they did it. It was
Sure.
I like the artistic style of how they put that montage together at the end. I wish the film had carried more of that style throughout it, but
I got you.
was at least interesting.
I'll say too, I forgot to mention this in the original review before we cut and have our break. I liked the way that they handled the fact that Michael was still alive in this film. You know, most films it's just like, nope, Michael Myers is back and here he is. He's just going around doing stuff. They cut from the film. The original one has him in the basement with the house on fire, and the Strode women are going away. They open this movie, after the flashback, and you see the house on fire. You see them going away, and you see fire trucks rushing to the scene. And she's like, no, let it burn. But they go in there, and what do firemen do? They try to put out a fire, and because of that, Michael gets access out of the basement. I thought that was genius. So it's like, okay,
it was smart.
that's how he. I
And
thought
he's
that was a really good way.
He was like behind a roll down garage door type of thing. So that's how he kind of had stayed back there waiting for people to come rescue the house.
So I thought it was like a decent explanation
a good
other than just
start.
he's like, yeah.
And it was a pretty interesting ending.
Sure.
I just felt like everything in the middle was just
messy
and didn't really make sense. Okay. Spoilers are done. Thanks for listening. We'll be back here from our break in just a moment with some movie news and our recommendations. So stay tuned. Foot Candle Films here on the Mesh.tv. We'll be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Jackson Creative, a custom communication agency located in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, specializing in online content creation. To learn more, visit thejacksoncreative.com. Jackson Creative, we tell your story.
Welcome back to Foot Candle Films here on the Mesh.tv. First half of the show, we had our reviews of No Time to Die and Halloween Kills.
Yes.
Both interestingly titled, playing off each other. No Time to Die, but yet Halloween Kills. So anyway, fun with titles.
There you go.
All right, Chris, let's move on to the part of the show where we do some talk about upcoming projects and films that we're following. You know, we reviewed ones that are out in theaters now, but now let's talk about some that are going to be up and coming that we're maybe interested in. And if it's okay with you, Chris, I'm kind of taking over this news this week.
That's fair.
Because we've got to talk comic book movies. It's been a little while since we've either talked about one. I think Black Widow was the one that kind of we did get to cover. Was there another one? Oh, we did Suicide Squad.
Well, and we did Shang-Chi.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I guess there has been a lot more than I realized. Well, they made a lot of announcements in the last few days about some new projects coming out or when to expect new ones, both from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Cinematic Universe, whatever it's called. And so we have a lot of project updates. So I thought maybe let's do this, Chris. Maybe let's go and hit the highlights of both camps and kind of what they have coming out.
Only fair.
And then that way
time.
You can tell me what projects of them, if any, you are excited about or you find interest in.
Sure.
And why. And I'll do the same here as well.
Okay.
So let's start first with the DC side. They had their Fandom event just this past weekend, where that's their opportunity to talk about all of their media coming out soon, films, TV.
And this is separate than like a Comic-Con. This is just a little individual thing just for DC.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there were really 4 projects I was going to mention kind of briefly that they touched on that I think are more of interest to us film-wise.
Okay.
3 of them were actually going to be films. One of them will be a TV show, but I do want to bring it up because I think it's interesting.
Okay.
First off, let's talk about The Batman. And just to clarify, this is The Batman.
Batman.
That is the differentiation between the Tim Burton 1989 Batman, is this one has the in front of it. It is scheduled to premiere now March 4th, 2022.
Okay.
It is directed by Matt Reeves. As we've talked about before, I think we actually did the teaser trailer we talked about. Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne / Batman. We got Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. Paul Dano as the Riddler. And although not mentioned in this article, I know for a fact Colin Farrell as the Penguin.
So he is supposed to be the Penguin.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yes, that is what I'm being led to believe.
Okay.
So with that, Chris, we do have a new trailer. Would we like to play the new trailer?
Yeah.
And then we can kind of dissect it and talk about it here afterwards.
Sure.
Okay, great. Here's the trailer, the new trailer. Probably, well, they may do another trailer between now and March, but this is kind of the first full big standard trailer I think we've seen for the film. Here it is, The Batman.
Police! Hands up! Stay still! Get out of here!
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
So there you had the trailer. I know on an audio podcast, not the most riveting thing to listen to, but at least hopefully you get a sense of the tone of the film. Chris, your thoughts on the trailer for The Batman? Couple raise or lower your interest in the film?
Well, I thought the teaser that they'd put out that as you mentioned, we did discuss, briefly. I thought that was good. This probably maybe raises my anticipation a little, but I'm already pretty hyped for this. Batman is my favorite character, and tends to be more of my favorite comic book movies. Although, just like everybody else, I am getting kind of burned out on them. But I really, I am anticipating this. I do. If they were to come out with another trailer, I think I will probably try to skip it unless it comes on in a movie theater that I'm not going to get up and run out. But I already feel like, okay, yeah, you've already got me excited. I don't want to know any more plot details. I don't want to see any more cool scenes. I don't want to, I don't want to know any more.
Okay.
And it's interesting to me, and I can't keep track. We, bring items up here on the show, but I can't keep track of when this film was begun to be developed, and if it was before, which maybe, or after the Joker came out. Or sorry, that one was just Joker, I believe, not the Joker, but
I think
just
this
Joker.
is all after. I think
Okay.
it kind of started after the Joker came out.
Because here's
kind of a
my
hit.
thing, it's like DC, as we've discussed, DC tried to hurry up and do a Justice League movie. I felt like was a little rushed, and they had Zack Snyder redo it. Whereas Marvel had spent their time planting the seeds, watching the plants grow, and then harvesting them for the whole Avengers Endgame and kind of putting a bow on that whole however many movies they've done. A lot of movies.
Yeah, a lot of movies.
So I feel like maybe DC had tried, trying to do the same thing. And then now I wonder if they're just going to like, you know what? Okay, forget that. What we're going to do is we're just going to do gritty, adult, depressing. We're like, you thought Christopher Nolan's Batman stuff was like dark, just hold my beer. Like Matt Reeves is like, tell you what, hold my beer. Hold my beer, Christopher Nolan. I'm going to, because these things look really dark, which is sad, I guess, for little kids who love to run around and play Batman. Don't think they're going to be seeing this one because it looks kind of dark. Maybe they probably shouldn't see it, just like they shouldn't have seen Joker. But I am interested. I am excited, but I am an adult, and I realize, it's going to trend towards that audience, but I am excited. I mean, I would just wonder going forward if for a lot of DC things, if that's going to be kind of a strategy. It's like, what would be interesting is to see like a gritty rundown of Wonder Woman. They've had 2 Wonder Woman movies. The first one was more successful, I think, than the second one, 1984, both of which we reviewed here on the show. But what would happen if they did like a Wonder Woman film in the vein of The Batman or Joker? Or even more odd would
Superman.
be like a Superman movie.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that would really work because that's not really, those characters don't really
Batman is
portray
the only
that.
one of these characters in their universe I want to see as a gritty, dark character. The rest of them, I don't think they should go there.
Got you.
DC is finding its success, like you said, with more of the adult themed or more darker versions. Even Suicide Squad. I mean, yes,
Well,
that was meant to be
in the title.
funny, but I mean, it was still a pretty violent
Sure.
and dark comedy movie, and which is not at all what I would expected from the DC characters years ago. But that's where they kind of have fallen right now. And you're right; they have given up on the idea of a big shared universe story. They're like, nope, just everybody go do their own thing, have fun. And that's kind of what they've
Because
created.
Aquaman's about to have another movie as well, right?
Right. And granted, it's the same, that is one they also talked about. The Aquaman is going to be Aquaman in the Lost Kingdom. Director James Wan, who did the first one, is coming back again for this.
And he also did Malignant.
He did do Malignant. I know. He had to take a little break from Malignant. And now he's back to Aquaman.
Sure. Okay.
So that's going to be coming back out. That one, of course, is kind of tied in with Justice League because it's the same character and same
Right.
actor and all. So we've got that as well. They did announce the new Shazam movie, Fury of the Gods, is going to be coming out.
Okay.
Zachary Levi as Shazam once again. This one is now going to include Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu as villainous gods. So I guess the bad ones
okay.
that they play against. So I enjoyed the first one. I thought it was fun. So that is one that's kind of playing against the rest of the universe.
Right.
They're going to go a little lighter, a little more family friendly with this one.
It's like in a way, I mean, this is bad comparison, but like, it's like DC's family friendly version of like Deadpool because it doesn't take things seriously and like
it's
kind of
just- it's
bends
poking
conventions
fun
and poking
kinda-
fun,
yeah.
very aware. So, yeah.
The other film they mentioned or talked about or showed two of them. They showed little clips from.
Okay.
One is going to be Black Adam, which, for
Is that-
those not in the loop, that is going to be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Okay.
Black Adam is commonly known as the the villain for Shazam,
I was about to say, so that's
but they're doing it as a separate movie. Again,
Oh.
all rules are out the window. Just
Interesting.
whatever people want to do.
Do you think he's
going
going to be at least? I mean, I assume is the Shazam movie going to come out before Black Adam? So maybe he'll at least be like teased or something, or we don't know.
I don't have a date for Black Adam.
Okay.
Shazam is going to be June 2023.
Okay.
So we're still a year and a half away from Shazam.
Now,
I think
if
they're
Black
just now
Adam is
starting.
bad though,
Well, I think
no?
they're going to play him as kind of an anti-hero.
so kind of like the Venom whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
Interesting.
But that's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's been teasing this movie for years, like the making, and it sounds like they finally have at least a couple clips,
Okay.
and it's at least going to be a year from now before that thing shows up anywhere.
Okay.
Last movie I'll mention is The Flash. Now,
Now, is that still starring Ezra Miller?
it is. Ezra Miller is still in it.
'Cause
They released a very, very, very teaser trailer for it.
Okay.
Ezra Miller actually introduced the teaser trailer on the whole conference, the big expo thing.
Okay.
And in the teaser trailer, we see that Ezra Miller gets to act alongside himself because there are multiple versions of the Flash in this movie.
Okay.
The whole multi-universe thing that DC has as well. There'll be someone playing Supergirl, although I don't think you really see her much in the trailer. But this teaser does do one thing that has got all fans in a tizzy.
Uh-oh. Get the fans in a tizzy.
A good tizzy.
Oh, okay. Good tizzy.
The
not bad
narrator is a familiar voice. The narration is by Mr. Michael Keaton. And you get the profile of him in his Batcave as his version of Batman. So Michael Keaton is going to be in the Flash movie as the 1989 Batman version, but now a older version of him. Because in this movie, the Flash can hop between different realities and
Got you.
universes.
So instead of running into Robert Pattinson as Batman, he's understandable
Yes.
that he could run into.
Yes, he's running into the Michael Keaton version of Batman in the film.
Yeah, I mean, okay, DC, just
They're
throw
doing
it
it.
out the window.
They
Like
are doing
whatever.
it. Whatever.
So they may actually kind of get the jump on the whole multiverse thing, which is going to be with Doctor Strange. Like they're just saying, like, okay, we're already there. We're
Well,
doing all
yes
sorts
and
of
no.
crazy
I mean,
stuff
keep in
and
mind
timelines. And
the Flash is still going to be another year before it comes out.
Okay,
I think.
gotcha.
So
So,
I think Marvel will still be beating them to everything here in the next 6 to 9 months.
Right.
But DC's giving it a run too. So yeah, of course. I mean, there's even a shot where you see Ezra Miller getting ready to take the tarp off the Batmobile, which is very clearly from the shape of it, the 1989 Batmobile. And you don't see it, but you know he's getting ready to reveal it. So they're going to go all in on the
So
nostalgia.
do we
for this
do
one.
we know? And of course, the answer is no because the movie's not out yet. But do you get a sense that I mean, they're doing that to make fans happy, or do you think Michael Keaton and that whole Batman will play kind of a role in the Flash movie, or do you think it's probably going to be like 5 minutes of the movie?
My guess is it would be a relatively small role, but
okay.
I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, I have no idea.
Huh.
Michael Keaton's been in he's been in some Marvel movies. He's been, out and about. So who knows? Maybe he is playing a bigger part in this film.
But that because I'll be honest, you were saying we're going to announce each one, and you're going to tell them, and I'm going to say like level of interest. 0 interest in the Flash. 0.
Even with knowing Michael Keaton.
I watched a little bit of the TV show, whatever, just 0 interest. But the fact that Michael Keaton, I'll probably see it just because I want to see the Batman stuff from Michael Keaton. So you got me on that one.
That was the hook that we needed to get.
And I guess actually kind of good because I already had really low expectations for a Flash movie. So that makes me interested, but I'll still kind of go in with low expectations because I'm just thinking that it'll be such a small part of it. So
It very well could be.
But we'll see.
The last thing I was going to mention from the DC fandom,
Okay.
which is not a movie, but I think it's close enough related that we should mention it.
Okay.
We talked about Suicide Squad as a film that we reviewed a couple months ago when it came out. John Cena played a character called Peacemaker in that film.
Right.
So they have now shown the trailer for the James Gunn produced TV show.
But he's not directing.
I think he may be directing like the first episode, possibly.
Sure.
I'm not sure. And typically, if you got the big name
Right.
producing the show, they get to do like 1 or 2 episodes, and then other people direct the rest of them.
Gotcha.
So HBO Max will have a TV show based on John Cena's character, the Peacemaker. I got to admit, the trailer was really funny.
Okay.
It looks fun. I totally see the vibe they're going for with it. It is very much in the vein of Suicide Squad. They're playing him as kind of a goofball, kind of arrogant goofball, but also you can tell the film's going to skew into having some more, make him a real character and have real development of him as well.
And this takes place timeline-wise before the movie that we saw.
No, I think it takes place right afterwards. Because if you recall,
Okay.
spoiler for if you have not seen Suicide Squad, one of the end credit scenes is Peacemaker is in the hospital room alive. And I think even in the trailer they showed for the show, you see him coming out of the hospital room. So I assume it's all happening right after the Suicide Squad movie.
Gotcha.
So anyway, it's James Gunn's producing it. I think he is directing at least an episode. I'm not sure about that. But I just thought it's interesting, to already have a spin-off TV show off of a movie that just came out a couple months ago. It's pretty interesting. But I think they have a lot of confidence in this character. And, of course, John Cena, I think John Cena wants to be funny. He's very, very funny and has a good comedic timing. And that's going to play this series well. So, Okay. So, sounds like gauging from you, Chris, before we hop over to the other side of the coin. You're obviously very interested in the Batman movie.
Yes.
That is your number one. Barring the Batman movie, take that out of the equation. We've got the Flash movie. We've got the Shazam movie. We've got the Aquaman movie. Mm-hmm. And we've got the Black Adam movie. Of those 4, any of them?
Not really. No. The Flash movie only
just because of the Batman.
Yeah.
So it's all Batman for you. Right. That's it. If there's no Batman, Chris Fry is not interested.
Yeah, predictable,
all right.
I guess. But
that's fine. I'm kind of with you on that. The Shazam movie I think will be fun, but it's not like I'm eagerly waiting for it. When it comes out, I think it'll be a fun time.
Sure.
Let's hop over to the Marvel side of the pond here.
Okay.
Of course, Marvel has, like you mentioned, Shang-Chi, Black Widow has been released in the last little bit. Eternals is getting ready to come out in just a couple weeks. I'm sure we will be reviewing it after it comes out.
I'd imagine so.
But they also just today have announced some revised schedule plans for some of their upcoming movies. Things are getting delayed, which is kind of interesting.
Because now that the world, pandemic is, we think we see an end in sight. Production has started on a lot of
but
movies.
everything is getting shifted back. Granted, some of them are more noticeable shifts than others.
Okay.
So up after the Eternals, which is in November, it looks like the one we have after that is going to be the Doctor Strange movie.
Got you.
Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is going to go from March 25th back to May 6th. It's only like a month and a half back. Not
Making
dramatic
it more
there.
of a summer release.
More summer release. Yeah. Then we've got Thor, Love and Thunder, which is going to be Taika Waititi directing again. moving back 2 months from May to July. Then we've got Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which is the sequel to Black Panther, going from July down to November. So all of this is pumped as well. The Marvels, which is going to be the Captain Marvel sequel, starring Brie Larson, and where she's going to be joined by other Captain Marvels, or Ms. Marvels, I guess you could say. Yeah, you're shaking your head. You don't know
confused.
this. Trust
No,
me on it. You're fine. Nothing to worry about yet.
Nothing to see here.
That is getting bumped into early 2023.
Okay.
And then Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantum Mania, is being moved from February to July 2023. So everything's getting kind of shifted back, but that gives you an insight as to the films they have coming out over the next year.
Can I just say,
Yes.
it's not going to be earth shattering for anybody probably listening, and I think most people would probably feel the same. I like Paul Rudd. I liked the first Ant-Man movie. Granted, Peyton Reed, educated in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, grew up in North Carolina, so kind of have his mom actually taught me middle school English. So have a soft spot for him as a director. And he's done other films I like too, like The Breakup and Down with Love. The second Ant-Man movie, I felt like, I guess, the character itself, once we got past an origin story, and I like Paul Rudd, there's just not really much that interests me. So the second movie I felt like was kind of running on fumes. I think the most interesting thing was Michael Pena, hyped up on, I guess, drugs, and he was talking really fast or whatever. That's what I remember about that movie. Third film for an Ant-Man, I don't know. They're gonna, and the name of it even sounds like quantum. I guess like the quantum universe and everything.
I think it's just going to be funny. I think that's the whole kind of.
And Paul Rudd can be funny, but I'm really leery of that one.
Well, then let me ask you this, kind of standing back.
Sure.
Of the four I mentioned, I think I mentioned 4, maybe 5 films: Doctor Strange 2, Thor: Love and Thunder, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. That was 3, and then. I'm not even going to mention the Marvels and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Those are so far out. Of the 3 that they're planning for next year, where's your interest level? Which one are you the most looking forward to?
No surprise to anyone there, probably, but Love and Thunder. Yeah.
Because of Taika Waititi.
Yeah, because of Taika Waititi. I like Thor, Chris Hemsworth doing Thor, although I don't know if they're going to shift to having a female Thor or whatever. I don't know if they're shifting to that. Natalie Portman, yeah. So I don't know, but I don't care. I feel like there's the most possibility for something different, and I really like Taika Waititi. So yeah.
Well, I'm the most intrigued for Doctor Strange, mainly because Sam Raimi is coming back to direct it, which I think is kind of interesting. I'm anxious to see them do something kind of really trippy and wild with that movie, so could be interesting.
I would say that would be my second follow-up was a Doctor
I'm
Strange. Curious
about the Black Panther movie only because I was one that I liked Black Panther, but I did think maybe it was a little overrated. I was a little more disappointed in the film than I thought I would be. Of course, I'm very curious how they're going to handle the role after Chadwick Boseman's untimely passing.
Right.
So I'm more curious about that film. Looking forward to Doctor Strange, and I'm looking forward to Thor as well. Should be. I think it's an interesting slate of films they've got coming up next year that should be very telling. I still think Eternals is going to be a really big test. I still think Eternals, if Eternals bombs or just really gets bad reviews or nobody goes to see it or whatever, it could throw some things off. I don't know.
So the Eternals could be Marvel's Justice League that DC had.
I just don't know. I want it so bad to be good, but
so do I.
It's also got the potential to be not at all what people are wanting and tough to sell. So we'll see. And then there's also a Spider-Man movie coming out in December, I believe, as well this year that I didn't mention, but that's not changing. Right. That's still happening in December. So Eternals, Spider-Man, and then we roll into the schedule I just mentioned.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of superhero films coming our way, people.
I know.
If you thought they were maybe kind of paused or done during the pandemic for a little while, they were just paused. They were not done. They are coming back, whether you like it or not. Me, I'm okay with it, but I will admit I've gotten to the point with the Marvel movies. I'd like to see some more unique visions and unique takes on stories and characters. With the DC comic ones, they haven't really hit me very well, any of the ones they've done, but at least they're trying some different things, which I'll at least give them credit for that.
Sure.
Okay, well, that's all the news I've got, Chris. It was all comic book geeky news for us today. So with that, why don't we go ahead and roll into our recommendations? So if somebody's still listening to us even after all this and wants to hear of a good recommendation of something to check out, maybe in their free time this coming weekend, whatever it may be, something they can watch online is the only requirement we have. Chris, what do you want to recommend for our audience this episode?
So I'm going to recommend the second documentary of 2021 done by somebody, a director who is known for being a director of narrative films, and it's their first documentary. This time, instead of being Edgar Wright with Sparks Brothers, it's going to be Todd Haynes, director Todd Haynes, and his documentary of The Velvet Underground. And I won't say like I like The Velvet Underground, and I was really excited to have a director that I know can direct a film, try to do a documentary for the first time, thought that was interesting. And I won't say I was just bowled over. My expectations probably were really high. But what I do admire is that it's unlike any other music documentary I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And not that it doesn't have talking heads, because it does have some of that. But a lot of it is voiceover from different interviews of people and montages of just really experimental, kind of bizarre film footage that was shot by people that were either Andy Warhol or satellites of people, acolytes of his that, kind of took over his type film work, or contemporaries, because I'm not familiar with a lot of the avant-garde people that were doing film work in New York and in the surrounding areas. But it really makes for an interesting visual experience. And a lot of times you'll see where he uses a lot of split screen. So on one side of the screen, you see all these random images, and on the other side, you'll see somebody talking, or you'll just see a very slowed down, for example, film footage of like Lou Reed staring straight at the camera, while on the other side, all this crazy random stuff is going on. So it was just really, really interesting. And I guess when a lot of people hear about the Velvet Underground, including me, you think of Lou Reed, because I think after the Velvet Underground crashed and burned, he was the most successful member to kind of come out of that and kind of, state and make a lot. And other people made subsequent albums, but he was the most high profile. Lou Reed, obviously, in this film, he is only in it through archival narration because he's passed away. And I guess many people know this about Lou Reed, could kind of be a little difficult dude. Mm-hmm. And boy, does this documentary say, yes, he could be difficult. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't think it's unfair because they have family members commenting on him and stuff. But what I found most fascinating was kind of the more, and I wanted more. I think it could be a documentary of just her, Mo Tucker, Maureen Tucker, the female drummer who is still around. And, footage of her and, past footage, but also current, like present day stuff of her talking about the band and her experience. And man, I think like I would have liked a little more stuff like, so it was you and these three dudes. How was that? Because just to have been her, I don't know, just real fascinating. So I was glad to hear a lot of stuff from her. And also John Cale, who was a member that left the Velvet Underground, but he and Lou Reed kind of had a lot of Paul McCartney, John Lennon kind of vibes going on. But when they were together, kind of the really interesting music the Velvet Underground made with, just the whole like droning instruments and like kind of cacophonous noise, like a lot of noise stuff, just really interesting. And you get an insight into Lou Reed kind of maybe pushing them to be more pop, whereas John Cale was obviously more interested in the experimental. And then you have the firecracker randomness of Andy Warhol. So, and I guess like at the end of the day, you're just like, maybe you didn't learn anything new, but somehow it was just really interesting to see a documentary that just kind of gives you an experience. Like, I think Andy Warhol and probably Mr. Problematic Lou Reed would probably say, yeah, that was great. Like, it's like they don't reveal anything, but they just kind of show you like, they do give you a sense of how important this band was and how influential they might have been and how they were different, So while everyone probably wouldn't, just swarm to see this documentary, but if you like Velvet Underground, if you like Lou Reed, or just interested in kind of experimental film, I think you would appreciate The Velvet Underground by director Todd Haynes. It is available right now exclusively on Apple TV Plus, and I think it is playing some select theater dates around the country, kind of in limited release. But you may have Apple TV Plus because you're checking out Ted Lasso, so you have it already. So check out The Velvet Underground if you're interested.
I am interested in seeing this. I'm a big Lou Reed fan, but I'll self admit that I never dug as deep into The Velvet Underground beforehand. I was really more into his solo career.
Interesting.
So I am anxious to watch it.
Okay.
Very, very curious to see. Todd Haynes, director. I've had some. Todd Haynes and I have had some difficulties connecting before.
Okay.
I still have not quite gotten over the experience of watching. Is it I'm Not Here, the Bob Dylan film?
Yeah.
That one still doesn't work for me, and I'm still wrestling with it. And,
Well, in a way, except that was a narrative film about Bob Dylan, but which was very weird and odd. This is weird and odd, but it's just a documentary. So it'll be
I'll have to
curious.
see how I do with it. So,
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So that is what's the name of the
So the name of the documentary is just The Velvet
Underground.
Yes.
Okay. The name of the band. Good. All right. Well, that is on Apple TV Plus, as Chris mentioned, available right now. All right, Chris. I got to pull a cheat.
Okay.
And I'm only bringing this up because I know you and I have both watched this. It's not per se a movie, unless you consider it a 9-hour-long movie broken into individual parts. It is a miniseries, but it is streaming. It is one that everybody seems to be talking about right now. Saturday Night Live even had a skit about it, which kind of tells you it has hit the
It's in the
zeitgeist where
popular
everybody
side,
now
sure.
knows it. Right. And it is Squid Game. I just want to mention it only because from a filmmaking standpoint, I do want to kind of talk about its merits, but yet also give a couple words of caution to people as well to be aware of the show. This is the one that's gotten all the acclaim. Well, not even all acclaim. It's gotten some blowback as well, but a lot of popularity. I think it already set records on Netflix for being like the most watched show they've had, in the history of
I'm glad
Netflix.
something overtook Tiger King because
Yes, it absolutely has, which I agree with you. I think this is at least a step in the right direction. The premise of the show, for anybody who hasn't heard about it or knows about it, is that hundreds of players are brought to a strange location to compete in a series of children's games, all with the idea of winning a very, very large and growing cash prize. The catch is these are all people that have been brought here because they're all at difficult points in their lives financially and cash strapped, maybe owing money, maybe severely in debt, whatever it may be. So they see this as their option to get out. The little bit of the rub is that, if you don't win your game, you die. So
kind of
that's
like a Running Man type situation.
it
Meets
definitely,
Hunger Games.
the influences here, obviously the Running Man, you've got kind of a Most Dangerous Game kind of story mentality to it. There is a mystery involved with, why was anybody doing this and who's behind it. I think the things that work for this show that make it interesting to watch is that you have a different assortment of characters to follow. Almost like Lost, almost like the TV show Lost in a way, in that, yes, you maybe have one or two characters who are your more dominant characters, but you still get some investment in the rest of the characters and their background and lives. Obviously, you have these competitions and games, which kind of plays into more of the reality TV that I think people are so enamored by, watching competitions and people competing against each other. Then you've got the heavy stakes and drama of the fact that, people are dying.
Yeah.
Quite gruesomely, quite violently. It is a very, very violent show.
Agreed.
But I think for it being 9 episodes, I was fairly happy with the progression, the development, and the ending of it. Could it have been a little tighter? Maybe so. Maybe by an episode or two. But I actually liked that each game kind of had its own episode to focus on. And then you had a couple of other episodes to just develop characters and tell backstories on. So overall, I was okay with the format. It definitely didn't need to be any longer. I think it kind of met its match on the length. And I did like it. I thought it was entertaining is the word I would use. Didn't go as deep, thought-provoking as maybe it could have on the whole idea of poverty and people at the end of their rope kind of taking on really dangerous situations to help resolve that. It tries to play a little bit of an anti-violence message, but yet it's still revels in the violence of the game. So
sure.
it's a little complicated in what it's trying to say, but I think for pure entertainment, I think it was a fun watch. And I do think production-wise, the making of the series is really high caliber and looks good and plays really well. So, Chris, I know you just finished this as well.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that you want to echo or share?
No, I'm kind of along the same lines. Yes, not for everybody because some of the violence is pretty intense. I do like the fact that they try to be, there are some twists that they try to weave in. Maybe they didn't resolve some things the best fashion. They kind of maybe do some red herrings in there, which maybe, okay. But I did like it. And what struck out to me is, the acting is good, but to me, like the MVP of the entire series was just the production design and the costume design. Because, if you know anything, if you've heard anything about this show, it's just very visually stunning because the employees of this game, they all wear these pink jumpsuits with these masks that hide their faces, and they have these shapes on that tell whether they're a worker, a soldier, or basically they're like a manager. And then you have all the players are all in these green jumpsuits. And even the games themselves are just very stylized. It's kind of hyper stylized, but it just really worked for me. There's also these staircases that lead from like their dormitories to where the arenas that they play these games in. And it's kind of taken directly from like an MC Escher drawing, but instead of being black and white, it's all these like hyper data glow colors. So it's just, I know that you can tell there was a lot of thought put into this series. And while some of the points don't work for me exactly, but overall, I think it's worth checking out because it's pretty original.
Yeah, I never lost interest. And I think that's the biggest thing I can say about a 9-episode miniseries is I never once said, I'm not interested anymore in watching or waiting for the next episode. I'm always eager to see where it went. So I do think it was a fun watch. Again, extremely violent.
Yes.
Caution on that. I need to put that out there because I think somebody could easily hear the premise and see some of the visuals from it and think it's going to be a lot more, a lot less intense than it is. But no, it is extremely, extremely violent.
Yeah, there would be no doubt if this came in the theater, it'd be a R.
Very, very hard.
It wouldn't be a
R, yeah.
PG-13. So
not at
just
all.
be aware.
So be aware of that. But overall, I do think Squid Game is worth a recommendation because it's one of the Netflix sensations or whatever the buzzworthy shows that I actually think kind of earns it. I mean, I think it actually holds up as opposed to many others we've seen. They get all the attention, they get all the buzz in the news, and then you watch it and it's just not really, doesn't really hold up for it. So
Agreed.
all right. So that's our recommendations. The Velvet Underground on Apple TV Plus, and then Squid Game, the series on Netflix is what we're recommending at this time. So Chris, that seems to be everything for this episode. No Time to Die, Halloween Kills. We were both generally satisfied with No Time to Die. You were probably a little more positive still again on Halloween Kills than I was. I was disappointed and a little down on the decisions made in that film. And then we had our big comic book geekery news blowout for a while about Marvel and DC movies coming out.
Right.
And then ending up with our recommendations. So if anybody wants to comment on anything we talked about today, Chris, how can they get a hold of us?
You can send us an email to info@footcandle.org. You can follow us on Twitter @footcandlefilm. Al and I are also on Letterboxd, where you can track what we're seeing, and sometimes we leave short reviews. And then also we would ask you, because of the value that you receive from this podcast, if you like what you're hearing, give us a star rating, write a review, share with friends in iTunes to help us reach new listeners. We're also on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, Pocket Cast, and you can also catch some of our back episodes if you don't want to subscribe necessarily. We're also featured on the Mesh.tv website where you can find our podcast, but other podcasts, comedy podcasts like comedian John Reep, or you can also check that out for other podcasts, and that also helps us because we're on that network.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call on that. So please reach out to us, and thanks for listening today. As always, if you have a good time listening to this and want to share it with others, we certainly do appreciate that as well, sharing it with other people and listeners. And we will look forward to speaking with everybody next time we get together to talk some new movies and upcoming movies. So for Foot Candle Films, thanks a lot for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
See you in the ticket line.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.